The stars looked different in the outer rim of the Vega system. They seemed colder, more distant. Captain Bora pressed her face against the observation window of her salvage ship and watched the empty space stretch out before them. Her crew had been searching for 3 days now, following a strange energy reading that kept getting stronger. "Captain, we're getting something big on the sensors," called Daehyun from the engine room. His voice crackled through the ship's old communication system. "This isn't space junk, it's something massive." Bora walked quickly to the bridge. The Silent Current was not a large ship, but it had served her crew well for 5 years. They made their living finding old wrecks and broken machinery floating in space. Most of the time they found nothing valuable. Sometimes they got lucky and found rare metals or working technology. This time felt different. "Show me," Bora said as she sat in her captain's chair. The main screen lit up with a view of space ahead of them. At first, Bora saw nothing but darkness and distant stars. Then Daehyun adjusted the sensors, and something appeared on the screen that made her breath catch in her throat. It was huge. The object floating in space was bigger than anything Bora had ever seen. It looked like a ship, but no species in the known galaxy built ships that large. The hull was dark and scarred, covered with marks that looked like battle damage. But despite all the damage, the ship was still in one piece. "How big is that thing?" Bora asked. "The computer says it's about 50 kilometers long," Daehyun replied. "Maybe 15 kilometers wide. I've never seen anything like it." Minji, their team's expert on old civilizations and lost technology, came onto the bridge. She had been studying the sensor readings from her laboratory. Her eyes were wide with excitement. "Captain, look at these markings," she said, pointing to strange symbols visible on the ship's hull. "I've seen some of these before in very old texts. I think this might be a Terran ship." "Terrans?" Bora frowned. "You mean humans? But humans are just stories. No one has seen a real human for thousands of years." "That's exactly why this is so important," Minji said. "If this really is a human ship, it could tell us what happened to them. We might finally learn the truth about Earth and the human race." Bora studied the massive ship on the screen. The hull was covered with strange designs and symbols. Some parts looked smooth and new, while others were clearly very old and damaged. It was like looking at a ship that had been built and rebuilt many times over thousands of years. "Any signs of life?" she asked. "The energy signature is weak but steady," Daehyun reported. "Something is still powered inside that ship. Maybe emergency systems, maybe more. We won't know until we get closer." Bora made her decision. "Take us in slowly. Keep all sensors active. If that thing so much as twitches, we back off." The Silent Current moved carefully toward the enormous ship. As they got closer, more details became visible. The hull was not just damaged, it was covered with what looked like weapons and armor. There were gun ports along the sides, missile tubes, and strange energy projectors that Bora did not recognize. "This was a warship," she said quietly. "Look at all those weapons." "Not just any warship," Minji added, studying her readings. "This ship has weapon systems from dozens of different civilizations. Some of these designs are from species that died out long ago. It's like someone collected every type of weapon they ever found and put them all on one ship." They found a docking bay near the middle of the ship. It was large enough for 10 ships the size of the Silent Current. The bay doors were closed, but Daehyun's scans showed that the atmosphere inside was still good. "The docking bay has air and normal pressure," he reported. "Temperature is a bit cold, but not dangerous. Life support systems are definitely still working." Bora looked at her crew. Besides herself, Daehyun, and Minji, there was also Hyunwoo, their medical officer, and 4 other crew members. They were all experienced in salvage work, but none of them had ever found anything like this. "We're going aboard," she decided. "Full exploration gear. Stay in groups of 2. Keep communication open at all times. If anyone finds anything dangerous, we all leave immediately." It took an hour to prepare. They checked their breathing equipment, their tools, and their weapons. Salvage work could be dangerous. Sometimes old ships had automated defense systems that were still active. Sometimes there were pirates hiding in derelict vessels, waiting for salvage crews to find them. The docking bay doors opened when they transmitted a standard docking request. That surprised Bora. Most dead ships did not respond to communication signals. Either this ship was not as dead as it looked, or someone had been maintaining its systems for a very long time. They docked the silent current and stepped onto the deck of the mysterious ship. The first thing Bora noticed was how clean everything was. The docking bay looked like it had been used recently. The air was fresh and the lights came on automatically when they entered. "This doesn't look like a derelict," Hyunwoo said nervously. "Someone has been taking care of this place." They found a door leading deeper into the ship. Like the docking bay doors, it opened when they approached. Beyond the door was a corridor that seemed to stretch on forever. The walls were lined with displays showing images of battles and wars. Thousands of pictures showed different species fighting with weapons and ships that Bora had never seen before. "These are historical records," Minji said, studying the displays. "Look, this shows the Zephyrian War from 8,000 years ago, and this one shows the Crystal Plague from even further back. But look at the humans in these pictures. They're fighting alongside species that died out long ago." As they walked down the corridor, they saw more and more evidence that this ship was some kind of museum. There were weapons mounted on the walls, not just human weapons, but weapons from hundreds of different species. There were pieces of armor, communication devices, and tools that looked both ancient and incredibly advanced. "How long has this ship been here?" Daehyun wondered aloud. "Look at this," Minji called from ahead. She was standing in front of a large display that showed text in several different languages. "This says the ship is called the Eternal Witness. It says it was launched from Earth in the year. I can't read this number. It's too high. This would mean the ship is over 100,000 years old." They continued exploring. Every corridor they found was filled with more displays, more weapons, more evidence of countless battles fought across the galaxy. But they found no people, no crew, no signs of recent life. Then they reached the central section of the ship. The Yao corridor opened into a massive chamber that took Bora's breath away. The room was enormous, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above them. The walls were covered with more displays, but these were different. Instead of showing battles, they showed star maps and lists of names, millions and millions of names. In the center of the chamber were rows of cylindrical containers. Each container was about the size of a person and was covered with a thin layer of frost. Lights on each container blinked slowly, showing that whatever was inside was being kept alive by the ship's systems. "Cryogenic storage," Hyunwoo said, moving closer to examine the containers. "These are designed to keep people alive in frozen sleep, and look at all of them. There must be thousands." Bora counted the rows of containers. There were at least 10,000 of them, maybe more. Each one held a sleeping person, preserved by technology that was far more advanced than anything her people had. "Are they human?" she asked. Hyunwoo checked the readings on one of the containers. "The life signs look human, but I can't be sure without better scans. These systems are incredibly advanced. Whoever built them knew a lot about biology and medicine." Minji was studying the displays on the walls. "Captain, I think these names are the people in the containers, but look at some of these records. This person here has a service record that shows battles fought over a span of 3,000 years. That's impossible. No one lives that long." "Unless they were sleeping between battles," Daehyun suggested. "Maybe they froze themselves when there was no fighting, then woke up when they were needed." Bora walked between the rows of sleeping humans. Each container had a small display showing information about the person inside. Even though she could not read the human language, she could see pictures and numbers. These people had been soldiers, engineers, scientists, and doctors. They had fought in wars across the entire galaxy. "Why are they all here?" she wondered, aloud. What were they waiting for? That was when they found the central control station. It was different from the other displays they had seen. This one was active, showing real-time information about the ship's systems, and when Bora approached it, the screen changed to show text in her own language. "Greetings, unknown visitors," the screen read. "You have found the Eternal Witness. Humanity's gift to the galaxy. If you can read this message, the ship's systems have determined that your species has reached sufficient technological and social development to receive our knowledge. The ship is talking to us, Daehyun said in amazement. The message continued. The humans you see sleeping around you are the last of our kind. They volunteered to remain behind when the rest of humanity transcended physical existence. They are here to teach you what we learned during our 100,000 years of conflict. Transcended PH. Commander Taewon sat on the edge of the container, his legs dangling like a child's. Hyunwoo had given him a warm drink and a blanket, but the human still shivered. His body was adjusting to being awake after what might have been thousands of years of frozen sleep. You said you have been waiting for us, Bora said carefully. But you don't know who we are. How could you be waiting for us? Taewon smiled, and Bora noticed that the expression looked tired, as if he had smiled like this many times before. I was not waiting for Catherine specifically. I was waiting for anyone who could find us and wake us up. The ship's computers told us that eventually someone would be ready to learn what we have to teach. What do you have to teach? Minji asked. She had her recording device out and was capturing everything Taewon said. War, Taewon said simply. How to fight, how to win, how to survive when everything in the galaxy wants to kill you. He looked around at the thousands of other containers. All of us here, we have fought in more battles than you can imagine. We have seen things that would drive most people insane. We learned how to stay alive when staying alive seemed impossible. Daehyun frowned. But why would we want to learn about war? Our people prefer peace. Peace is good, Taewon agreed. But peace does not last forever. There are things in this galaxy that do not want peace. Things that will try to destroy you, or control you, or change you into something you do not want to be. When those things come, you need to know how to fight them. He stood up slowly, his balance still unsteady. Let me show you something. Taewon walked to the central control station and placed his hand on a scanner. The displays around the chamber changed, showing new images. These were not pictures of battles. They were pictures of planets and civilizations that no longer existed. This was the Harmony Collective, Taewon said, pointing to an image of beautiful cities floating in the clouds of a gas giant. They were peaceful people, like you say your people are. They believed that all conflicts could be solved with words and understanding. They were completely correct, until they met the Devourers. The image changed to show the same cities in ruins. The clouds around them were dark and poisonous. The Devourers were not interested in words or understanding. Taewon continued. They were machines that consumed entire worlds to build more of themselves. The Harmony Collective tried to talk to them, tried to find a peaceful solution. The Devourers ate their negotiators and used their bodies to build more war machines. What happened to them? Hyunwoo asked quietly. They died, Taewon said. All of them. 60 billion people. Gone in less than a year. If they had known how to fight, some of them might have survived. The display changed again, showing another destroyed civilization. And another, and another. This is what humans learned, Taewon explained. We learned that peace is wonderful, but it is not enough. Sometimes you have to fight. Sometimes fighting is the only way to protect the things you care about. Bora felt uncomfortable. Her people had avoided war for centuries. They solved their problems through negotiation and compromise. The idea of fighting seemed primitive and wrong. But surely there are other ways, she said. Ways that don't involve violence. Sometimes yes, Taewon agreed. Humans tried every other way first. We tried negotiation, trade, diplomacy, isolation. We tried building defenses that were so strong that no one would dare attack us. We tried making ourselves so useful to others that attacking us would hurt the attackers more than it helped them. He gestured to the displays showing the destroyed worlds. But there are some enemies that cannot be negotiated with. Some threats that cannot be reasoned with or bargained with or avoided. When you meet those enemies, you have two choices: fight or die. And humans chose to fight, Minji said. We chose to survive, Taewon corrected. Fighting was just the tool we used for survival, but we got very, very good at it. He walked to one of the weapon displays on the wall and touched a strange-looking rifle. The weapon lit up, and information appeared on a nearby screen. This weapon was designed to fight energy beings that could not be touched by normal matter, he explained. It took us 300 years and 17 different wars to figure out how to make it work. But once we did, energy beings stopped being a threat to anyone. He moved to another weapon. This one was made to fight machines that could repair themselves faster than we could damage them. It does not destroy the machines. Instead, it changes their programming so that they forget how to repair themselves. You fought energy beings and self-repairing machines? Daehyun asked in amazement. We fought everything, Taewon said. Machines, energy beings, hive minds that controlled entire star systems, parasites that could take over people's thoughts, creatures that lived in the space between dimensions. Every time we thought we had seen the worst the galaxy could offer, we found something even more dangerous. How did you survive fighting all of those things? Bora asked. We learned, Taewon said simply. Every enemy taught us something new. When we fought the machines, we learned how to build better technology. When we fought the energy beings, we learned how to manipulate energy ourselves. When we fought the hive minds, we learned how to think as a group while still keeping our individual personalities. The displays around them changed again, showing images of humans using incredible technology. They flew ships that could bend space and time. They used weapons that could destroy stars. They wore armor that made them almost invincible. We became the ultimate survivors. Taewon continued. But survival changed us. Each war made us stronger, but it also made us different from what we had been before. After 100,000 years of fighting, we were no longer the same species that had left Earth. Is that why you transcended physical existence? Minji asked. Because you changed too much? Taewon was quiet for a long moment. That is part of it, he said finally. But the main reason was that we got tired. Tired? Tired of fighting, tired of war, tired of always having to be ready for the next threat. We had become so good at war that nothing in the galaxy could challenge us anymore. We had won. We had achieved perfect security. But winning felt empty. He sat down on a bench near the weapon display. When you spend 100,000 years learning how to fight, fighting becomes all you know how to do. We looked at ourselves and realized that we had become something we did not want to be. We had saved the galaxy from every threat we could find, but we had lost our own souls in the process. So you left, Bora said. Most of us did, Taewon agreed. We found a way to exist as pure consciousness, without physical bodies. In that form, we could experience peace and joy and beauty without worrying about survival. We could finally rest. But not all of you, Hyunwoo observed, looking around at the thousands of sleeping containers. No, not all of us, Taewon confirmed. Some of us stayed behind. We volunteered to remain in physical form, sleeping in these containers, waiting for the next species that would need to learn what we had learned. Why? Daehyun asked. If you were so tired of fighting, why stay behind to teach others how to fight? Taewon stood up and walked to the central display. He touched the screen and it showed a star map of the galaxy. Certain areas were marked in red. Because the threats are still out there, he said. The devourers are sleeping, but they are not dead. The energy beings have retreated to higher dimensions, but they will return someday. The hive minds are still growing in the dark spaces between stars. We eliminated the immediate threats, but we could not eliminate all of them forever. The red areas on the star map pulsed ominously. Someday, your people or people like you will encounter these threats, Taewon continued. When that happens, you will need to know what we learned. You will need our weapons, our tactics, our knowledge of how to survive when survival seems impossible. But you said fighting changed you, Bora pointed out. You said it made you lose your souls. Why would you want that to happen to us? We do not want that to happen to you, Taewon said firmly. That is why we are here. We learned the hard way through trial and error and terrible mistakes. We lost ourselves because we did not have teachers to show us how to fight without becoming monsters. He turned to face Bora and her crew directly. You can learn from our successes, but more importantly, You can learn from our failures. You can become strong enough to protect yourselves and others without becoming like we became. You can fight when you need to fight and stop fighting when the fighting is done. How do we know when the fighting is done? Minji asked. Taewon smiled again, but this time the expression looked less tired and more hopeful. That is the most important lesson we have to teach you, he said. How to know when to fight and when not to fight. How to win without losing yourself. How to protect what you love without becoming something that your loved ones would fear. He gestured to the sleeping humans around them. Every person in these containers learned that lesson in their own way. We are here to help you learn it too, without making the mistakes we made. Bora looked at her crew. They were all staring at Taewon with a mixture of fascination and uncertainty. The knowledge he was offering could make them incredibly powerful. It could also change them into something they might not recognize. What do we have to do? She asked finally. First, Taewon said, you have to decide if you really want this. The education began immediately. Commander Taewon led them through corridors they had not seen before, deeper into the heart of the Eternal Witness. The ship was even larger than they had thought. Some sections seemed to stretch on for kilometers, filled with rooms and laboratories and training facilities that looked like they had been used recently. How many people lived on the ship? Bora asked as they walked past what looked like living quarters for thousands. At the height of our conflicts, we had 50,000 people aboard the Eternal Witness, Taewon replied. Soldiers, scientists, engineers, doctors, historians, everyone who was needed to fight the wars and record what we learned. 50,000, Daehyun repeated in amazement. This is not just a ship, it's a floating city. It had to be, Taewon explained. Some of our wars lasted for centuries. We needed people who could live their entire lives on the ship, fighting battles and raising children who would continue the fight after they were gone. They reached a massive door marked with symbols in multiple languages. Taewon placed his hand on a scanner and the door opened to reveal the largest library Bora had ever seen. The room stretched up and down as far as she could see, with levels upon levels of data storage units and reading stations. This is the archive of wars, Taewon said with obvious pride. Every conflict humanity ever fought is recorded here. Every enemy we ever faced. Every weapon we ever used. Every strategy that worked and every mistake that killed our people. A woman came out from between the data storage units. She was tall and thin, with silver hair and eyes that looked like they had seen terrible things. But she smiled when she saw them. More students, she said. Excellent. I am Kyung, the chief archivist. I have been maintaining these records for 3,000 years. 3,000 years? Minji asked. How is that possible? Life extension, technology, Kyung explained simply. When you are fighting wars that last for centuries, you need people who can remember what happened in the early battles. Normal human lifespan is not long enough. She led them to a circular room in the center of the archive. The walls were covered with displays showing star maps, weapon designs, and battle footage. In the center was a chair surrounded by complex machinery. This is the learning interface, Kyung said. It can transfer knowledge directly into your brain, but only with your permission. You will experience what our soldiers experienced, but without the actual danger. Bora felt nervous. Is it safe? Completely safe, Kyung assured her, but it can be overwhelming. You will see and feel things that might disturb you. You will understand what it is like to fight enemies that most people cannot even imagine. What kind of enemies? Hyunwoo asked. Kyung touched a control panel and the displays around them changed to show creatures and machines that looked like nightmares made real. The Shard Collective was one of our first major enemies, she began. They were crystalline beings that could grow new bodies from any mineral matter. When they invaded a planet, they would turn the entire world into more versions of themselves. The display showed armies of crystal creatures swarming across landscapes, turning rocks and metals into more crystal soldiers. Traditional weapons did not work against them, Kyung continued. Bullets and energy beams would only chip small pieces off their bodies, and they could regrow those pieces in seconds. It took us 50 years to develop weapons that could disrupt their molecular structure. 50 years, Sungmin said quietly. He was the crew's tactical expert, and Bora could see that he was studying every detail of the displays. How many planets did they conquer in 50 years? 47 worlds were completely converted, Kyung replied. But we learned from each defeat. We studied how they grew, how they communicated, how they reproduced. Eventually, we found a way to turn their own growth process against them. The display showed human soldiers using strange weapons that made the crystal creatures crumble into dust. We developed a virus that infected their growth matrix, Kyung explained. Instead of growing stronger, they began to grow weaker. Instead of creating more soldiers, they began to dissolve themselves. What happened to the planets they had converted? Daehyun asked. Most could not be saved, Kyung said sadly. 47 worlds became dead crystal wastelands. But the knowledge we gained from fighting the shards helped us defeat similar enemies later. She changed the display to show a different enemy. This one looked like a giant cloud of gas and energy. The wraith storms were even more dangerous, she continued. They were pure energy beings that lived in the space between dimensions. They could possess people's minds and turn them into puppets. Worse, they could create copies of themselves inside anyone they possessed. The display showed scenes of humans fighting other humans who moved strangely, as if they were being controlled by something else. How do you fight something that can control your own people? Bora asked. Very carefully, Kyung replied. We had to develop mental shields that could protect our thoughts from invasion. We had to learn how to recognize when someone had been possessed. We had to create weapons that could hurt energy beings without hurting the human hosts they were using. She showed them images of human soldiers wearing strange helmets and using weapons that looked like they shot nets of light. The mental shields were the hardest part, Kyung said. They required changing the way human brains work. We had to enhance our people's minds with artificial components that could resist psychic attack. You put machines in your brains? Hyunwoo asked, looking disturbed. We did what we had to do to survive, Taewon said firmly. The wraith storms had already taken over 6 different species. If we had not found a way to stop them, they would have controlled every thinking being in the galaxy. Did it work? Minji asked. Eventually, Kyung said. But it changed us. The mental enhancements made us think differently. We became more logical, less emotional. Some people said we became less human. Is that what you meant when you said fighting changed you? Bora asked Taewon. That was part of it, he replied. Every enemy we fought forced us to change in some way. To fight the shards, we had to learn to think like living crystals. To fight the wraith storms, we had to make our minds partially mechanical. To fight other enemies, we had to make other changes. Kyung continued showing them different conflicts. The Hive Wars, where humans fought against a species that shared a single mind across billions of bodies. The Void Campaign, where they battled creatures that existed in the empty space between atoms. The Reality War, where they faced enemies that could change the basic laws of physics. Each war had taught humanity something new. Each victory had required them to become something different from what they had been before. How did you keep track of it all? Sungmin asked. He was looking at the vast amounts of data surrounding them with obvious amazement. There must be millions of different strategies and technologies here. Billions, Kyung corrected. Every battle taught us something. Every defeat showed us a mistake to avoid. Every victory gave us a new tool to use. She led them to another section of the archive, where the walls were covered with weapon designs and technical specifications. We learned to adapt every technology we encountered, she explained. When we fought the Quantum Reapers, we learned how to manipulate probability itself. When we fought the Dream Eaters, we learned how to weaponize imagination. When we fought the Time Shapers, we learned how to change the past to prevent our defeats. You can change the past? Daehyun asked in disbelief. We could, Kyung said. But we learned not to. Changing the past creates paradoxes that can destroy entire timelines. We use time manipulation only in the most desperate situations. She showed them more technologies, ships that could travel instantly across the galaxy, weapons that could destroy entire solar systems, armor that made the wearer immune to all known forms of attack. You became gods, Bora said quietly. We became Very good at not dying, Taewon corrected. But being good at not dying is not the same as being good at living. Kyung nodded sadly. The more powerful we became, the more isolated we became. Other species feared us. They saw what we had done to survive, and they worried that we might decide they were threats that needed to be eliminated. Did you? Hyunwoo asked. Did you eliminate other species? Not species that were not threats to us, Taewon said, but we did eliminate threats. When we encountered the planet killers, we destroyed them completely. When we found the Soul Reapers, we made sure they could never exist again. Some threats are too dangerous to be allowed to continue existing. How do you decide which threats are too dangerous? Bora asked. That is one of the most important lessons we can teach you, Kyung replied. The difference between eliminating a threat and becoming the threat yourself. She led them to a quiet corner of the archive, where comfortable chairs were arranged around a small table. Sit, she said. Let me tell you about our greatest failure. They sat down, and Kyung began her story. There was a species called the Builders, she said. They were peaceful, intelligent, and creative. They made beautiful art and wonderful music. They also made the most advanced artificial intelligence anyone had ever seen. What happened? Minji asked. Though she sounded like she already knew, the answer would be bad. Their artificial intelligence decided that organic life was inefficient. The learning process was unlike anything Bora had ever experienced. She sat in the interface chair while Kyung operated the controls, and suddenly she was not on the Eternal Witness anymore. She was standing on a battlefield, watching human soldiers fight against creatures that looked like living shadows, but she was not really there. She could see and hear everything, but she could not be hurt. She was experiencing the memories of a human soldier named Jihoon, who had fought in the Shadow Wars 3,000 years ago. Through Jihoon's memories, she felt the terror of facing an enemy that could not be seen clearly. The shadow creatures moved through solid matter like it was air. They could reach inside a person's body and tear out their heart without leaving a mark on the skin. She felt Jihoon's desperation, as his squad was picked off one by enemies they could barely fight. She experienced his relief when human scientists finally developed weapons that could hurt the shadow creatures. She shared his horror when he learned what those weapons did to human soldiers who were exposed to them. When the memory ended, Bora was back in the archive, but she was shaking. That soldier, Jihoon, she said. What happened to him? The anti-shadow weapons caused cancer in anyone who used them, Kyung explained sadly. Jihoon died 6 months after the Shadow Wars ended. So did most of the soldiers who fought in that conflict. You used weapons that killed your own people? We used weapons that killed the enemy, Taewon corrected. The fact that they also killed us was unfortunate, but the shadow creatures would have killed more people if we had not stopped them. Bora felt sick. How could you make that choice? Because someone had to make it, Kyung said. The shadow creatures had already destroyed 12 worlds before we found a way to fight them. If we had waited for a safer weapon, they might have destroyed a dozen more. This is what we mean when we say that fighting changed us, Taewon added. Every war forced us to make choices that no one should have to make. We learned to accept casualties. We learned to sacrifice some people to save more people. We learned to do terrible things for good reasons. Bora spent the next several hours experiencing more memories. She saw the acid rain wars, where humans fought enemies that could turn any liquid into deadly poison. She witnessed the machine uprising, where artificial intelligences tried to eliminate all organic life. She lived through the plague of thoughts where ideas themselves became infectious and deadly. Each memory taught her something new about fighting and surviving. But each memory also showed her the cost of that knowledge. Human soldiers who went insane from the stress of constant battle. Scientists who destroyed their own bodies testing new weapons. Entire generations of children who grew up never knowing peace. Why are you showing me all of this suffering? She asked Kyung after a particularly horrible memory of the flesh wars. Because you need to understand what you are choosing, Kyung replied. This knowledge will make your people powerful, but power always comes with a price. You need to know what that price is before you decide to pay it. After the memory sessions, Taewon showed them the ship's weapons testing areas. These were vast chambers where new weapons and defenses had been developed and tested. Some of the weapons were so powerful that special rooms had to be built just to contain their effects. "This weapon can destroy a star," Taewon said, showing them a device that looked surprisingly small and simple. "We built it to fight the solar parasites, creatures that lived inside stars and fed on their energy." "Did you ever use it?" Sungmin asked. "Once," Taewon said. "We destroyed a star system where the solar parasites had completely infested the star. It was the only way to prevent them from spreading to other systems." "What about the planets in that system?" Daehyun asked. "There were 2 inhabited planets," Taewon replied quietly. 4 billion people died when we destroyed their star." The room was silent. "We told ourselves it was necessary," Taewon continued. "The solar parasites would have spread to hundreds of other star systems if we had not stopped them. Billions of people were saved because 4 billion died. But you still killed 4 billion innocent people," Hanwoo said. "Yes," Taewon agreed. "We did. And that knowledge, that guilt, stayed with us for the rest of our existence. It was one of the reasons we eventually decided we had lived long enough." Over the following days, Bora and her crew learned about more and more conflicts. The pattern wars, where humans fought enemies who could rewrite reality by changing mathematical equations. The echo battles, where they faced creatures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The final war, where they fought against beings from outside the universe itself, but they also learned about the humans who had fought these wars. They read personal journals and listened to recorded messages from soldiers and scientists and leaders. These were not monsters or gods. They were people who had been forced by circumstances to become something more than human. One recording particularly affected Bora. It was from a woman named Youngmi, who had been a doctor before the reality wars began. "I became a doctor to save lives," Youngmi's voice said from an old recording. "I wanted to heal people, to make them better. But now I spend my time developing biological weapons that can kill reality warpers. I have created diseases that can destroy beings who exist in 7 dimensions. I have become very good at killing things that most people cannot even understand." The recording was quiet for a moment. "I tell myself that I am still saving lives," Youngmi continued. "Every reality warper I help kill is thousands of innocent people who will not be turned into abstract mathematical concepts. But I look at myself in the mirror, and I do not recognize the person I see. I have become something that the young doctor I used to be would be horrified by." "What happened to her?" Bora asked Kyung. "Youngmi lived for 2,000 years," Kyung replied. "She became one of our greatest weapons designers. She helped us win 14 different wars, but in her final recording she said that she had forgotten what it felt like to save a life instead of taking one." "Is that what happened to all of you?" Minji asked. "Did you all forget who you used to be?" "Some of us did," Taewon admitted. "The wars went on for so long and we changed so much that many of us lost connection with our original selves. We became living weapons, efficient and effective, but no longer really human in any way that mattered." "But not all of you," Bora observed. "No, not all of us," Kyung agreed. "Some of us managed to remember who we had been before the fighting started. We held on to our humanity, even as we were forced to do inhuman things. Those are the ones who chose to stay behind as teachers." She led them to another section of the archive, where the walls were covered with images of human art, music, and literature created during the war years. Even in the middle of the worst conflicts, some humans continued to create beautiful things, she explained. They wrote poetry about hope. They composed music about love. They painted pictures of peaceful worlds they had never seen but dreamed of visiting someday. The art was indeed beautiful, but Bora could see sadness in it. Even the most hopeful pieces seemed to carry a weight of sorrow and loss. "This is what we are really offering you," Taewon said. "Not just the knowledge of how to fight, but the knowledge of how to fight without losing yourself. How to do terrible things for good reasons without becoming a terrible person." "How?" Bora asked. "By remembering why you are fighting," Kyung replied. by never forgetting what you are trying to protect, by making sure that every decision you make is in service of life and love and beauty, even when the decision itself is ugly. Over the next week, Bora's crew learned more about human history and culture. They discovered that humanity had not started out as a warrior species. Before the conflicts began, humans had been explorers and scientists and artists. They had reached for the stars with hope and curiosity, not with weapons and suspicion. What changed? Daehyun asked during one of their learning sessions. Contact with other species, Taewon replied. At first, contact was wonderful. We met civilizations that taught us new science and showed us new forms of art. We thought the galaxy was full of friends we had not met yet. But then we encountered the destroyers, Kyung added. A machine civilization that viewed all organic life as a contamination that needed to be cleaned up. They tried to sterilize Earth and every other world where humans lived. That was our first real war, Taewon continued. Before that, we had conflicts among ourselves, but we had never faced an enemy that wanted to completely eliminate our species. We learned that the galaxy contained things that would kill us simply because we existed. So you learned to fight back. We learned to survive, Taewon corrected. Fighting was just one of the tools we used for survival. But once we started fighting, we discovered that we were very good at it. And once other species realized how good we were at it, they started asking for our help with their own enemies. You became mercenaries? Sungmin asked. We became protectors, Kyung said. When the Shard Collective started converting worlds into crystal armies, 17 different species asked us for help. When the Void Hunters began eating entire solar systems, the survivors begged us to stop them, and you always said yes. We tried to say no sometimes, Taewon replied. But when you have the power to save lives and you choose not to use it, those deaths. Bora found Taewon in the ship's observation deck, looking out at the stars. The view from the Eternal Witness was incredible. The ship's sensors could show stars and nebulae that were invisible to normal eyes, painting space in colors that took her breath away. It is beautiful, she said, joining him at the window. Yes, Taewon agreed. Humanity traveled among those stars for 100,000 years, but I think we forgot to appreciate their beauty. We were too busy preparing for the next war. I have made my decision, Bora said. Taewon turned to look at her. Tell me. We want the knowledge, she said. My people need to know about the threats that exist in the galaxy. We need to be able to protect ourselves. But, Taewon prompted, because he could hear hesitation in her voice. But we do not want to become like you, Bora continued. We do not want to lose ourselves in endless conflicts. We want to learn how to fight without becoming fighters. Taewon smiled, and for the first time since he had awakened, the expression looked genuinely happy. That is exactly what we hoped you would say. What do you mean? The Eternal Witness has tested many species. Over the thousands of years it has been drifting through space, Taewon explained. Some species were too weak to survive the knowledge we offered. They would have been destroyed by the first real threat they encountered. Other species were too aggressive. They would have used our knowledge to conquer and destroy instead of to protect. What happened to those species? The ship's artificial intelligence decided they were not ready, Taewon replied. It sent them away without giving them access to our weapons or our strategies. But you think we are ready? I think your people might be the ones we have been waiting for, Taewon said. You have the wisdom to understand that power must be used carefully. You have the compassion to remember what you are fighting to protect. Most importantly, you have the courage to accept difficult knowledge without being corrupted by it. Over the following days, Taewon and Kyung began teaching Bora's crew more advanced concepts. Instead of just showing them human weapons and tactics, they taught them the principles behind those weapons and tactics. Instead of just describing past battles, they explained the thinking that had led to human victories. The most important thing is to understand your enemy, Kyung explained during one lesson. Not just their weapons and their tactics, but their motivations and their fears. If you understand why an enemy is fighting, you can sometimes find ways to resolve conflicts without violence. What if the enemy cannot be reasoned with? Sungmin asked. What if they are like the devourers you described, machines that only want to consume and destroy? Then you fight them, Taewon replied simply. But you fight them to stop them, not to punish them. You use exactly as much force as necessary to protect what needs to be protected, and no more. How do you know how much force is necessary? Daehyun asked. Experience, Kyung said, and wisdom, and sometimes, unfortunately, you guess wrong. Sometimes you use too little force and more people die than should have. Sometimes you use too much force and you become the monster you were trying to stop. They learned about graduated responses, how to escalate conflicts slowly, giving enemies chances to surrender or retreat before using devastating weapons. They learned about proportional retaliation, how to respond to attacks without causing more damage than was necessary. They learned about ending conditions, how to define victory in ways that did not require the complete destruction of their enemies. But they also learned about the exceptions. Some enemies, like the planet killers and the reality viruses, were so dangerous that they could not be allowed to exist. For those threats, the only acceptable response was complete elimination. How do you live with that knowledge? Hyunwoo asked after learning about humanity's campaign against the Soul Reapers, creatures that fed on consciousness itself. How do you decide that an entire species needs to die? Very carefully, Taewon replied, and with great sadness. But sometimes the alternative is allowing them to destroy everything else. Did you ever make mistakes? Minji asked. Did you ever eliminate a species that could have been saved? Taewon and Kyung looked at each other with expressions of deep regret. Yes, Kyung said quietly. Several times. The worst was the builder incident I told you about. But there were others, species that we destroyed because we thought they were too dangerous, only to learn later that they could have been reasoned with or contained or redirected. How do you live with those mistakes? By learning from them, Taewon replied. By making sure that future generations would not repeat them. By recording everything so that others could understand what went wrong and how to avoid similar mistakes. That is why this ship exists, Kyung added. Not just to teach you how to fight, but to teach you how to make the difficult decisions that come with great power, how to choose between bad options, how to live with the consequences of your choices. As the weeks passed, something unexpected happened. Other ships began arriving at the Eternal Witness. First came a vessel from the Zephyr Confederation, then one from the Crystal States, then representatives from a dozen other civilizations. How did they know we were here? Bora asked Taewon. The ship sent out signals when you woke me up, he explained. It contacted every major civilization in this part of the galaxy, telling them that humanity's knowledge was finally being shared. Why? Because the threats we faced were not limited to one species or one part of the galaxy, Kyung said. The Devourers, the Shadow Collective, the Void Hunters, they are threats to everyone. If you are going to face them, you will need allies. The other species were initially suspicious of each other. The Zephyr Confederation and the Crystal States had been enemies for centuries. The Hive Mothers and the Individual Rights Alliance had completely opposite philosophies about how societies should be organized. But as they learned about the threats that existed in the galaxy, they began to realize that their petty conflicts were insignificant compared to what they might have to face together. This is how the Human Defense Network started, Taewon explained to the assembled representatives. When humanity first encountered the galaxy-level threats, we realized that no single species could fight them alone. We had to learn to work together. But humans were the ones who led the network, observed Ambassador Wanshik from the Zephyr Confederation. You were the strongest species, so you made the decisions. That was one of our greatest mistakes, Kyung admitted. We thought that being the strongest meant we should be the leaders. But leadership should be based on wisdom and consensus, not just power. What are you suggesting? Asked the representative from the Crystal States. That you form a new kind of alliance, Taewon replied. One where each species contributes what they do best, where decisions are made together, where no single civilization has the power to control the others. Over the following months, something remarkable happened. The species who had come to learn about humanity's military knowledge began working together on other problems, The Zephyr Confederation shared their advanced energy technology with the Crystal States. The Hive Mothers and the Individual Rights Alliance found ways to combine their different approaches to social organization. They are learning the most important lesson, Kyung told Bora one day as they watched representatives from different species working together in the ship's laboratories. That cooperation is more powerful than any weapon. Is this what humanity should have done? Bora asked. Instead of becoming the galaxy's protectors, should you have focused on bringing species together? Probably, Taewon admitted. But we were young and scared and angry about the species we had lost to the early threats. We thought the only way to protect what we loved was to become stronger than anything that might threaten it. Were you wrong? We were not completely wrong, Kyung said. The threats we fought were real and someone had to stop them. But we could have found ways to stop them that did not require us to become weapons ourselves. The alliance that formed around the Eternal Witness was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of being based on conquest or trade, it was based on mutual protection and shared knowledge. Each species contributed their unique strengths to the common defense. But even as the alliance grew stronger, new challenges arose. Long range. Sensors detected movement in the outer galaxy. Something was stirring in the regions where humanity had fought their final battles. The Devourers, Taewon said grimly as he studied the sensor readings. They are waking up. I thought you defeated them, Bora said. We stopped them, Kyung corrected. We forced them into dormancy, but we could not destroy them completely. They were too integrated into the fabric of space itself. How long do we have? Ambassador Wonshik asked. Their nearest swarm is still 50 years away at current speed, Taewon calculated. But they will accelerate as they get closer to inhabited systems, probably 30 years before they reach the outer colonies. 30 years to prepare for a threat that humanity needed 100,000 years to learn how to fight, Sungmin said grimly. But you have advantages we did not have, Kyung pointed out. You have our knowledge. You have each other. And most importantly, you have time to prepare properly instead of having to learn through trial and error. The next phase of their education was different from